All right, so I don't have very many slides, so we'll go through the slides real quick, and then we'll jump into the demo. Like Karen said, my name is Scott Ferrimond. I'm a manager at Cerner. I manage a team at Cerner that we call the IP Factory. Brian's been on me to change that name, but we use it everywhere, so I don't know. We'll see. But basically what we are is we're for the most part, an internal IT team with direct responsibility for the tools, the applications, kind of the entire development life cycle. So the tools that our development teams use day in and day out to get their work done, from code management to automated builds to packaging the software and distributions to clients. So kind of covers the entire gamut. Jira being included in that set of tools. I want to kind of give a breakdown of our team, just to kind of give you an idea of our development teams and kind of how we are structured. We actually have two development teams. The first team I've got up there is more focused on our web development for the most part. So doing some new development for us and some newer technologies, that type of thing. We've got a solution designer, which is essentially a business analyst, if you will. A couple of architects, a couple of engineers, a test analyst that we share across teams. We have a combination solution designer and documentation developer. She kind of wears both hats. She's also shared across both teams, and then we have a project manager or scrum master that's shared across both teams. A similar makeup on the other team. They're primarily focused on some of our more foundational applications or systems. So our automated build system, our packaging system, that type of thing. So they've got a little bit different focus than the other team, but we split them up because they're doing really two different, well, not two different jobs, but they're basically two different focuses. They're both using agile methods, pretty much the same agile methods. So we've been using Scrum for, I don't know, 3 years now. Actually more, probably longer than that. 4 years now, 4 or 5 years now. So, and it's been working great for us. We actually recently switched to more of a Kanban methodology, actually about a month ago. So we're still kind of learning the ropes from a Kanban standpoint. So a lot of my demo, I'm going to focus on the Scrum side of Greenhopper, just because I think it's a little bit easier to grasp, and I'm not really as well versed on the Kanban side yet. So we'll touch on that a little bit, and I'll show you kind of how we're using it. But we'll probably focus more on Scrum. Who's seen Greenhopper or uses it? Okay, are you using it for Scrum, Kanban, Scrum? Okay. Okay. So I'll focus mostly on Scrum, and then again we'll leave some time at the end to look at the Kanban boards as well. A little bit about our environment. We have 3 production Jira instances, and I got to thinking about that. That's actually wrong. We have 4 instances, 3 that our team is directly responsible for, and 1 that's actually an external Jira instance that another team is actually maintaining at this point. At some point, we'll probably take ownership of that. All 3 instances are on 5.2.5 and Greenhopper 6.1.5. We do have an upgrade planned for later this year, or is in the works for later this year to 6. Currently, across all 3 instances, we have 907 projects, 851 custom fields, 273 workflows, 371,000 issues, 107,000 attachments, and about 800,000 comments. So it's pretty broad. So we talk a lot. So that's our configuration. We're actually in the process of moving our entire enterprise issue tracking system, which is currently in Siebel, to Jira. So that'll be probably an influx of another 200,000 issues or so if we decide to import them all. And it's hard to get a user count, so I didn't throw that one out there, but we're probably in the 4,000 to 5,000 range as far as users across the system.
Questions?
Sure, go ahead.
So why do you have 3 production Jira instances?
It's a good question. So we started off with 1, and we first installed Jira, it was version 3.13 or something like that. And it was kind of a free-for-all. We kind of let teams define their own workflows, define their own screens, that type of thing. We were just kind of, and it didn't take us long to realize that maybe that wasn't the best way to handle things. And prior to Jira 5, they start saying, okay, well, if you're getting up to the 200,000 issue range, you need to start looking at propping up another server. So that's what we did. We felt like our first server was getting, to be close to capacity. So we set up another server. Actually, we set up 2 new servers. Our second server is primarily focused on that migration from our Siebel product to Jira. So that will really be our kind of our enterprise level issue tracking system. It will directly interface with our client portal. Clients won't have access directly to Jira, but they'll have access to the portal. So that kind of isolated that one. And then our third instance is kind of it's kind of the one-off type projects, but we're a whole lot more particular on what we allow as far as custom workflows and custom screens, that type of thing. So we kind of learned from our mistakes on the first instance. So it's pretty much static. First instance is pretty much static. We're not making any changes other than upgrading it. So now I will say, with some of the enterprise level changes that Atlassian's making, some of those fears, as far as the number of issues and that type of thing, I think have gone away, and they continue to get better at that. So, but that's kind of why we have 3. The fourth one is actually, like I said, is externally focused, and it doesn't get a whole lot of use. So, but that's the reason we have multiples. Any other questions? So, in the interest of full disclosure, I will say that the majority of our team doesn't use Jira or Greenhopper on a daily basis. We just found that getting developers to put information in the tool on a regular basis, was kind of a constant struggle. And honestly, I haven't found an electronic method of displaying this information that displays as much as a traditional wallboard does. So that's why we both teams have their own wallboard. This is actually taken last night, so we actually had a release last night. That's why you don't see anything on the right hand side. We flushed everything. So, but this is our Kanban board as it exists today. So basically, what we're using Jira and Greenhopper for is kind of capturing what happens. So it's recording what's happening. We are a regulated company, so we have to keep track of our projects and as they move through the various processes and the life cycle. So, and we also use it for statistics. So it's capturing all of our data for us, obviously. So I use it quite a bit. Our project manager uses it quite a bit. But our teams in and of themselves pretty much rely on the physical board. So, like I said, if I can get Brian to spring for a 60-inch monitor to hang in place, maybe we might look at throwing a Jira Kanban board up there. But
I think we need to see a little bit more on the ready to deploy side.
Oh, you should have seen it last night. So, all right. So that's all the slides I've got. Unless anybody has any other questions, we'll jump into the demo. Everybody see that? Doesn't scale real well, does it? All right. So I actually installed Jira on my laptop over the weekend just to kind of have it local, so we didn't have to have no Wi-Fi connection. So this is a pretty basic install. I actually installed Jira 6 more because I wanted to play around with it than anything else. But actually tried to install 525 and couldn't get it to install on my Mac. So I just installed a fresh version of 6, so we can kind of walk through the basic setup in Greenhopper. Again, stop me if you have any questions as I'm going on here. So I thought we'd walk through, a lot of you have seen Greenhopper or used it. So I think if you've seen it in the past, you're probably familiar with the planning board, the task board, the report board. Atlassian's, I think, moving away from that and going to more of the rapid boards, or I think they just call them boards at this point. So I was going to set up a board, kind of walk you through that, what that process looks like. I'll kind of interject how we're using it or have been using it in the past as we go. So I'm going to create a new board. I really have two options. I can create a Scrum board or a Kanban board. They're fairly similar. There's a couple of things that the Scrum board provides that the Kanban doesn't, and vice versa. So we'll walk through those differences as well. So I'm going to create a Scrum board. You have the ability to create a brand new board and a brand new project at the same time. For the most part, most of our teams have an existing project, and they're just wanting to create a new board or new tracking board. So you can do it based on a specific project, or in this case, a JQL filter. So you could combine multiple projects or pieces of multiple projects onto one board if you want to do that. Name it. All right, so this is the basic planning view. And we'll kind of walk through this screen as well. So I've got some stories and some defects out there in my backlog. I wish my backlog was only 6, but it's not really the case. So kind of walking through this screen, you got the name of your board up here. Quick filters, we'll talk about those a little bit, but those gives you the ability to quickly filter your list down. I'd click on them right now, but you're not going to see any differences because all of these are my issues and they're all recently updated. So I'll show you what that looks like. Over on the left-hand side here, familiar with Jira, you'll be familiar with versions. This is just coming from version management from Greenhopper. So I have the ability to say, okay, I want this issue to land on that version, or be my fixed version for that issue to be 13. Our team, we do monthly releases, so we release the last Wednesday of every month, and we have 2-week iterations. So in some cases, we end up with 3 iterations between releases, or just depending on how the month rolls down. So, and if I want to remove it, I can just drag it over again. Epics. So Greenhopper gives you the ability to kind of create that parent-child relationship between epics and stories. So if you wanted to create some epics and break up your stories and associate those directly with an epic, you can do that. So you can see here, I've got this story and this story are both associated with that epic. And again, it's just a matter of dragging your story over, assigning it. So there's really 3 different modes in Greenhopper, specifically for Scrum boards. There's a planning mode. So this is where you can come in here. You can see kind of your complete backlog. You can reprioritize, that type of thing. You've got your work mode, which I'm not going to see anything because I haven't started the sprint yet. And then report mode gives you kind of the burn downs, and the burn ups, and that type of information. That'll get populated once we start the sprint. So, any questions there? All right. So I'm gonna create a sprint. Go ahead and create a sprint. Actually, let me step back. Let's go ahead and configure this board a little bit. Just give you an idea of some of the options. So if you don't like the way it's configured out of the box, there's definitely quite a bit of customization you can do. So the filter lets you, once you kind of determine what's the scope of this board. Is it just a project? Is it a specific piece of the project? You'll see in a couple of places where it says gh.rank or gh.something. It's a known bug in Jira 6. That they don't display the actual field name. I'm supposed to fix that in the upcoming version. And they were basically ranking using the built-in Greenhopper ranking. So columns, this is where you can start adjusting the columns that show up on your work board or on your task board. These are the three that come out of the box. Typically what we would do is add an in-certification column as well so we can track those what was being tested. But we tried to stick as much as possible with the basics. Down here, it basically is where you map your JIRA statuses to those various columns. So in a lot of cases, what we would do is remove closed from that column because we don't, once they're closed, we really don't want to see them on the board anymore. Column constraints, so if you're familiar with Kanban and the concept of work in progress, you can add column constraints even on the Scrum board. That's not something we had done, at least when we were using Scrum, but you have that option. And then simplify workflow. This is an interesting one, especially as a JIRA administrator, because I constantly have people saying, "Hey, can I change my workflow? Can I adjust my workflow myself?" And of course, we all know the answer is no, not unless you give them system admin privilege, which I don't really want to do. This actually allows the project administrators to adjust their workflows based on the columns that they have. I can't say that I've used this. It scares me a little bit. Number one, because I just don't, I don't want to have a ton of users creating workflows in there. But.
Well, I was hoping you were going to answer my question when I heard you're going to have a Greenhopper demo, because we've been going through this where somebody wanted to do this. And to do that, it creates a workflow scheme by that project name, a workflow by that project name. It also means all the statuses that they create show up in your administrative list of statuses.
Exactly.
And so we're not letting people do that because as big as our user base is, if only 10 guys did it for 10 projects, we would be okay.
Yeah.
But if 100 people do it, and all that, and the fact that people just create statuses, we're really leery. So
yeah,
I was hoping you were going to tell me, oh yeah, it's okay, go ahead, let them do
it. I think we're in the same boat. I think it's something that I hadn't really paid much attention to, and then I played around with it in our third instance, and I played around with it here. The other thing, it gives you it's a basic workflow, right?
Right.
It lets you go from any status to any status.
You can't do multiple projects. You can only use single projects. But
exactly.
We did it for one person, and then another person wanted to do it, and then we started realizing what was going to happen.
Yeah.
So, but then we also try to duplicate by using the regular workflows to do it, and my admin's doing all the work. He said he thinks he's missing something. When Greenhopper manages it, there's things that go on underneath the covers that you can't do by doing the regular workflow.
Yeah.
That's my part of it.
So use at your own risk. I don't have a whole lot of production experience with it, but
I'm gonna try and talk to him when I go out to the summit about this, what they were thinking.
Anyway, so that's an interesting piece. Swim lanes. So these are kind of your horizontal swim lanes. So we typically would set them up by story, so you can see the story and subtasks underneath them. Some teams would use the assigning swim lanes, so you could see who was doing what at any given time. And you can change these on the fly. Quick filters. So this is where I was talking about up at the top. We could have specific quick filters. So we have an application that we support called Flashpoint. So if I wanted to see just the issues that are related to Flashpoint, I could create a quick filter and say, okay, I only want components that are associated with Flashpoint, and add that. And when we go back to the board, I'll show you what that looks like. Card colors. Again, you can color these however you want based on issue type, by priority, by specific queries. So the way we've used that in the past is we had a couple of interns with us for the past couple of months, and we kind of wanted to separate out their work and have their own board. So what we did is created separate colors for them and use the query functionality to say, okay, assign to one of them, color it in this color, and put it in their own swim lane. So that's just an example of how we used it in the past. But for the most part, we color by issue type. Estimation just depends on how you do your estimates. We typically estimate the story level using story points, and at the the task level using hours. And this will allow you to track that as well. We'll turn that on. And working days. If you've got teams that work weekends, that type of thing, you can set your standard working days. Issue detail view. So when you click on an issue in the board, you'll see kind of the detail view. This gives you the ability to determine what you see, what fields you see in that view. I'll show you what that looks like as well. So again, lots of customization can be done. You can kind of make these things look however you want. I'm going to go ahead and create a sprint. You can create multiple sprints, so you can be planning for multiple sprints at once. So let's say I want to plan out my next couple of sprints. Let's see, I create sprint 1 and sprint 2. I can call them whatever I want. The key thing to remember here is these sprints are not versions. They're not JIRA versions. That was one thing we had to kind of get over, is we had a ton of queries that were based on versions that stopped working because we stopped putting our sprints in our versions. So these are Greenhopper versions or Greenhopper sprints and don't tie it together with the versions. So once you have your sprints set up, you can, again, start just moving stuff in. So let's say I want to do that story and that story. Gives you an idea of how many issues, story point estimate, and the time you have remaining based on your estimates. I'm just going to drag a few in here real quick, and then I'm actually going to start this sprint. You can only have one sprint started at a time, obviously, but you can be planning multiple sprints. This gives you the ability to set your start and end dates, and that will affect kind of what your burn down chart looks like. So definitely make sure those dates are correct. And go ahead and start. So it takes me directly to this work mode. You can see that since I've got the swim lane set with the stories, I can see the stories up across the horizontal and subtasks down the vertical here. So once I'm in the work mode, I can start start moving stuff around as things flow through the pipeline. This is again something that our team, we had a couple of people that would enter this information after every stand-up. So we had a couple of people after every stand-up. Stay for 5 minutes, enter the information, and we were done. That way we make sure it gets entered consistently. So it looked like in JIRA a couple of people were doing all the work, which wasn't necessarily the case. But so if I click on this issue, you see this is the detail view. Everybody know about the keyboard shortcuts in JIRA? I love keyboard shortcuts. So if you hit the period button, you can pretty much do anything from here. So you don't have to go to the cog over here and click edit or whatever. So I can edit from here or whatever. So like I said, then you can move issues through. Once you move to complete, your resolution screen will pop up. So you can enter a resolution, enter a fixed version. Questions, comments? Okay. The report view. So you can see here, this is my burn down chart. Looks like we're doing pretty well. But the nice thing about this is it keeps track of every single change. So you can kind of see at any point, okay, we changed the issue state, remove this one through. If you add issues or add stories to a sprint, that'll show up so you can kind of see, okay, well, it spiked here, what happened on that day? You can go down here and see it. So it's just a running log. We use that quite a bit. Sprint report, so this actually gets persisted once you finish the sprint or close the sprint. These sprint reports are available for as long as you need them to be. So you can go back and look at the burn down for a specific sprint and see what issues got completed, what issues did not get completed. So let's say we had a really, really bad sprint. We only got a couple of tasks done. Now at this point, It's a new version. Now I'm going to figure out how to close the sprint.
Oh.
There it is. So we can complete the sprint. We can say, okay, didn't get any issues done. So let me change that. That was done. So it gives me the ability to say, okay, all of your subtasks are done. You want me to update the parent as well. So we'll close that one out. And now we'll complete the sprint. Got one done, got one incomplete. What it will do with that one that's incomplete is it'll move it to the backlog and to the next sprint. So that, again, the sprint report will tell me what I got done, what I didn't get done. Velocity will show me I committed to 5 points and I only got 3 done. So there's quite a bit of information here. We've actually started using these rapid boards in place of our dashboards in most cases. So we have a couple of dashboards that we use just to make sure that things are done prior to release. But for the most part, the rapid boards have replaced that. Our story prioritization meeting, where we sit down every couple of weeks and go through any new issues, runs off of the rapid board. So we make pretty good use of it. Again, there's other types of reports out here. Version report. So we didn't actually release. I can just set that story to that version, so that's why that doesn't show up. But,
Scott, on those reports, can you export them if you need to do any kind of upload management type reporting or anything like that?
you can't export these, and I wish you could, because what we would end up doing is every day we would take a snapshot of the burn down chart and post that in our project room. So we would just basically take a snapshot and print that off. We haven't found a way to print the page real well. It's not something that Matt sees.
Do they integrate it with Confluence? Is there any way you can pull it into? Can you insert it into the Confluence page?
There's probably some. I know there's some widgets there's some dashboard widgets that are specific to Greenhopper, and I believe Confluence can pull in some of those widgets. So it's not something I've done, but it's definitely something that could be done.
Maybe then you can export it maybe from the
Could be.
you can export it maybe from Confluence.
Yep.
Currently, what some of our project teams do when they're setting up getting a new project going, they actually have a standard dashboard, and then they have user timesheets, burn down chart. They use the classic burn down chart. We haven't upgraded to get the new board burn down chart.
Yeah.
But they have the burn down chart and everything else, so management can actually log into Jira specifically to that dashboard, and they can see the burn down of the project and then yell at them when they it's that little bump there.
So spikes. Yeah.
And one thing I do want to know, just in case, I don't know if you got questions or if we've got a couple of questions in regards to the reports, is that, and it's a no-no, you shouldn't do it, but once you start a sprint, we have some that add issues to an active sprint, or they change the story points. That will not reflect in the reports there. It will only reflect what the story points that you captured. And if you add a story to an active sprint, it will not include those new additional story points. So just kind of FYI, you shouldn't do that, but sometimes we have teams that do that, and then they call saying, hey, I'm not getting all of my story points on this report here, or it's not reflecting accurately. I tell them to stop adding additional story points to their sprints.
Now, where it will show up is it will show up here on this page. You'll be able to see completed. I completed 3. And if I added 1, you'll see it here. But on that velocity chart, that threw us for a loop for a while. It's like, why are these numbers not matching up? Not that we added anything to us.
Right.
But yeah, there are some gotchas. We've had a couple of instances where we have to go track down. Okay, why is this showing this? That's especially true as we've moved on to Kanban. The control chart, the flow diagram. There's so much information in there. Probably won't show it here real well, but you can see. Kind of have to assume the data's right, in a lot of cases because it's harder to see exactly what you're looking at, but we're slowly figuring out exactly what this is showing us and why things look the way they do. So any other questions about the Scrum board? I'm going to throw together a quick Kanban board so you can see kind of what the differences are. Go ahead.
Every time you ask that, questions I'm eating. I did want to note, I think it's still a lab feature, but you can't have parallel sprints.
It is a lab feature. Yeah. We haven't turned that on, just mainly because nobody's really asked for it. But
We had some people ask, I turned it on, and no one's using it.
So I will say their lab features are usually pretty solid. I mean, we started using this version view was actually a lab feature for a while. So we started using that prior to including that in the GA rollout, and never had any problems with it. So works pretty well. I will say once we come to the end of our sprint, typically what we'll do is anything that's done or anything that's ready to release, that's when we'll drag those over to that version and say, okay, these are going out with this version. Just because one time we start a sprint, we're not sure entirely when this is going to be released. So that's when we'll start dragging things in those versions and assigning version. Anything else there?
Quick question.
Sure.
You're estimating each of your subtasks in hours, right?
Yes.
That's where the burn down comes from, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Now you used to be able to, and I haven't tried it lately, used to be able to do a story point burn down and an hour burn down, but I think it's all based on hours now. Yeah, it is. So in the classic view, I think you could do a story point burn down or an hour burn down. So now it probably depends on what you've got set here in your estimation. So if you don't have time tracking turned on, I'm guessing that's going to show you story points. So try it. Well, we've already closed that sprint. So, but that may be the case. All right. So I'm going to create a quick Kanban board here. The process is pretty much the same. So, be quick. So the first thing you'll notice is there is no planning mode on Kanban boards, which for me is kind of a bummer because I mean, that's kind of where I spend a lot of my time is prioritizing my backlog. And what we do is we have a pretty large backlog, about 1,000 issues. We don't show that in our to-do column. We only show the things that we prioritize there. So typically before we do planning, I'll go through and reprioritize things and get them to show up in the to-do column, but I don't really have a place to do my to prioritize my entire backlog. So what I end up doing is I create two boards. I create a Scrum board that pretty much I only use for planning, and then I create a Kanban board for tracking. I wish they would give you the ability to plan on the Kanban board. So work boards look pretty much the same. Again, you can move things between columns pretty much in the same manner. You've got the same quick filters up here. You do have the ability to release kind of as you go. So the idea of Kanban is you're kind of constantly releasing. So in our case, we still release monthly. At some point, we may start releasing just kind of dynamically as we need to. So we may start creating additional releases, but for now, we only have a release per month. So we have a version that corresponds to that release. Where the kind of the configuration comes in, again, very very similar. Columns. So here's where you want to start putting in your work in progress limits. So maybe we've only got, in our case, we could say we've got 4 developers, so we really only want to work on 4 projects at one time. And in our Kanban board today, we have a design column, we have a development column, we have a certification column. So you can see this one is actually using that simplified workflow. This is I was playing around with this earlier. So you can see I have the ability here to create a new status. And that actually creates a status in Jira. Like I said, it shows up everywhere. And then I can add a corresponding column. And it automatically pulled in there that status, or associate that status with that column. So. Yeah, I don't normally do that in production. But I know I wouldn't do that in production right now. So. All right. So those are the big differences. The other difference is the reports are more limited, so you only get a cumulative flow diagram and a control chart. This will kind of give you your cycle time numbers, that type of thing. Cumulative flow diagram kind of gives you, lets you identify some bottlenecks. This one looks pretty bad, but that's just because it's a bunch of dummy data. So I will put in the plug-in for Atlassian's data generator plugin. I used that last night for the first time. It's pretty nice. I mean, I generated about 300 issues in about 2 seconds. So they say you can generate about 100,000 in 15 minutes. So if you're wanting to do some testing, you can generate new users, you can generate new workflows. So check it out if you want to do some load testing or some user testing. Test boxes. So that's about it. I don't want to take up a whole lot more time. But any questions on the Kanban board?
What was your main reason to move from Scrum to Kanban?
A lot of it was we're still very much a support-oriented development team. So we have a support team that kind of does our first line support. But a lot of the more technical issues, they've got to engage developers. So what we're finding is it's getting harder and harder to estimate, our sprints because there was those interruptions. So, we had developers working support, that type of thing. So this Kanban kind of gives us the ability to better adjust to those. We're still using sprints. We're still using 2-week iterations, at least for the time being. And we're still using story points, which are 2 things in Kanban that are optional. Our main reason for doing that is to kind of judge moving from Scrum to Kanban. Are we getting better? Are we getting worse? And that's kind of the commonality between the 2 methodologies. Was okay. Typically, we were getting 20 story points done in a sprint. Has that gone down or in a 2-week period? Has that gone down? Is it going up? That type of thing. So at some point we may get rid of iterations and it's just one constant flow. I don't know. I kind of like the touch point every couple of weeks just to make sure that we're on track. So we definitely do retrospectives every 2 weeks as well.
Daily stand-ups?
Daily stand-ups. Both teams have daily stand-ups. Kanban, I think, is a little bit easier. We're not tracking hours anymore. So from that standpoint, it's easier on the developers because, like I said, we use a physical task board, and we had paper clips that we were moving on the cards to determine how many hours they had spent during the day and that type of thing. And, it was taking a lot of time to enter that information into Jira. It was taking a lot of time for them to keep track of it. So, and we weren't really doing a whole lot with that specific hour, that specific. Those specific estimates. So like I said, we just started doing this about a month ago. So far, we like it. So far, it seems to be a better fit for us. But those are the main reasons why we switched.
When you say you're no longer doing hours, so you're no longer doing.
We're no longer estimating in hours or tracking hours. So.
Why not?
We didn't. I mean, it really wasn't a problem for us. Our biggest problem was getting stuff done, right? So getting things from start to finish. In a lot of cases, we would throw a bunch of stuff on the sprint, and the bottom half wouldn't get done because we could add a few things to the sprint. But we did. So what Kanban allows us to do is focus on getting those things done, not necessarily how long is it going to take, but get this one line item done, get it off of the board. So it lets us focus kind of, let us focus on getting things done rather than, here's how many hours we're going to spend on this, or here's how many tasks, or how many stories we think we can get done in this 2 week period. So we may go back to it, but we just weren't doing a whole lot of that yet.
Do you have to do any kind of time tracking for client billing or anything?
Not our team. Our team doesn't. We do time tracking for,
There's supportization.
yeah. But from a client perspective, we want to turn on team primarily. So. And that's actually done in a different system. They would love to match up the system. That gets ugly. Anything else? All right. Turn it over to Mark.
Thank you, Scott,
Okay,
very
yep.
much.